high atop a windswept hill in southwestern Louisville, Kentucky, stands a massive Gothic structure that dominates the landscape like a dormant beast waiting to awaken. The imposing red brick facade of Waverly Hills Sanatorium hides thousands of tragic stories within its decaying walls, where hope and despair once danced a macabre waltz. Fog frequently clings to the base of the building and obscures the winding path that leads up the steep driveway where hearses once traveled with alarming frequency during the height of the epidemic. Visitors who dare to approach the property today report a heavy feeling in their chests, as if the very air inside is still thick with the bacteria that claimed over 60,000 lives, according to local lore. The silence here is not empty, but rather filled with the muffled sounds of coughing that echo through the corridors. The sheer scale of death that occurred within this isolated medical facility is difficult for the modern mind to comprehend, as it functioned as a city unto itself for the dying. During the early 20th century, the White Plague, known as tuberculosis, was ravaging the United States and wiping out entire families with terrifying speed and efficiency. Doctors of that era had very few weapons against the microscopic enemy, and the only known cure was rest and fresh air and plenty of nutritious food. This belief led to the construction of massive sanatoriums across the country, but few were as grand or as technologically advanced as Waverly Hills. It was designed to be a place of healing and restoration. But for many thousands of patients, it became a prison from which their only escape was death. The land upon which the sanatorium rests was originally purchased by Major Thomas Hayes in 1883 as a family home where he started a small schoolhouse. He named the property Waverly Hill because the teacher he hired loved the Waverly novels by Sir Walter Scott, and the name stuck even after the city purchased the land. The location was chosen specifically for its high elevation and constant breeze, which was thought to be beneficial for clearing the lungs of the afflicted. However, the isolation from the rest of Louisville also served a darker purpose by keeping the infected away from the healthy population. The fear of tuberculosis was so great that patients were often treated like lepers and cast out from society to live and die on this lonely hill. Construction on the original wooden clinic began in 1910, but it quickly became apparent that the small 2-story structure was woefully inadequate for the rising tide of cases. Tuberculosis was spreading through the low-lying, swampy areas of Louisville like wildfire, and the city hospital was overflowing with patients in advanced stages of the disease. The wooden clinic was expanded multiple times, but it was still overcrowded and lacked the facilities needed to treat the sick effectively. In 1924, construction began on the massive 5-story brick and concrete structure that stands today, which was designed to house over 400 patients. It was a monumental undertaking that utilized the most modern construction techniques available at the time to create a fireproof fortress against the plague. The architecture of the main building is a striking example of Tudor Gothic revival style, which gives it an appearance more akin to a university or a cathedral than a hospital. The layout was designed in a unique bat wing shape to maximize the amount of sunlight and fresh air that could reach the patients on the solarium porches. These open-air porches were the heart of the treatment program, and patients would spend day and night in their beds, exposed to the elements regardless of the season. Even in the dead of winter, when snow drifted across the blankets, the nurses would place heated stones at the feet of the patients to keep them from freezing. It was believed that the cold, fresh air inhibited the growth of the bacteria. But for many, it only hastened their demise. Life inside Waverly Hills was a regimented existence, governed by bells and strict schedules that dictated every moment of the waking day for the residents. Patients were separated by gender, and the severity of their condition and interaction between the wards was strictly forbidden to prevent the spread of emotional attachments. The doctors and nurses lived on the grounds in their own quarters and formed a close-knit community that was completely self-reliant. They had their own water treatment plant and powerhouse and bakery and laundry facilities, and even a farm that produced fresh meat and vegetables. It was a self-contained world where the staff fought a daily war of attrition against a relentless enemy that showed no mercy to the young or the old. Despite the grim purpose of the facility, the administrators tried to maintain high morale among the patients to boost their immune systems and will to live. They organized movie nights and musical performances and holiday parties where the halls were decorated with streamers and festive lights. There was even a radio station that broadcast music and news directly to the bedside of every patient through a headset system. However, beneath the veneer of cheerfulness lay a palpable undercurrent of fear and anxiety that never truly dissipated. Everyone knew that the person in the bed next to them might not wake up the next morning, and that they could be next. This constant proximity to death created a psychological pressure cooker that left a lasting imprint on the building. The medical treatments employed at Waverly Hills ranged from the benign to the barbaric, as doctors experimented with new ways to collapse the lungs and rest the infected tissue. One common procedure was called pneumothorax, which involved inserting a needle between the ribs to inject air into the chest cavity and force the lung to collapse. This had to be repeated frequently and was often painful and terrifying for the patients who felt like they were slowly suffocating. Another method was the placement of heavy sandbags on the chest to restrict breathing and force the lungs to work less. For those who did not respond to these measures, the surgical options became increasingly invasive and desperate. The most feared procedure was undoubtedly thoracoplasty, which was a major surgery that involved removing several ribs to permanently collapse the chest wall and the underlying lung. This gruesome operation was often performed in stages and could involve the removal of up to 7 or 8 ribs, leaving the patient disfigured and in agony. In an era before modern anesthesia and antibiotics, the risk of infection and shock was incredibly high, and many patients did not survive the trauma. The operating rooms on the 4th floor saw unspeakable suffering as doctors sawed through bone and muscle in a frantic attempt to save lives. It is said that the screams of the patients could sometimes be heard in the hallways despite the heavy doors. As the death toll mounted, the staff at Waverly Hills faced a logistical and psychological problem regarding the removal of the deceased bodies from the wards. They knew that seeing hearses constantly driving up the main entrance would destroy the morale of the living patients and cause panic. To solve this, they utilized a pre-existing tunnel that ran from the 1st floor of the sanatorium to the bottom of the hill near the railroad tracks. This 500-foot-long concrete tunnel was originally designed to transport supplies and coal up to the hospital during the winter months. It quickly earned the ominous nickname of the Body Chute, or the Death Tunnel, as it became the primary exit for thousands of corpses. The Body Chute is a cold and damp passageway that drops significantly in elevation and is shrouded in total darkness without artificial light. Bodies were placed on gurneys and wheeled down the long incline by orderlies who worked in silence and avoided making eye contact with the dead. At the bottom of the tunnel, a hearse would be waiting to whisk the body away to a funeral home or the crematorium before anyone at the main building noticed. This surreptitious removal of the dead maintained the illusion that people were getting better and going home rather than dying in droves. Today, the tunnel is considered one of the most haunted areas of the property, where visitors report seeing shadow figures and hearing footsteps. The 5th floor of Waverly Hills holds a particularly dark reputation and is the center of many legends involving the mental state of the patients and staff. This floor housed 2 nursing stations and a linen room, and the legendary room 502, which has become the focal point of paranormal investigations. It was here that mentally unstable tuberculosis patients were kept in isolation to prevent them from disturbing the others. The isolation combined with the ravages of the disease on the brain often led to madness and despair. It is also said that the nurses who worked on this floor were subjected to immense stress as they watched their charges slowly waste away. Legend tells of a head nurse in room 502 who was found dead in 1928, hanging from the light fixture or a pipe in the room. Some stories suggest she committed suicide after discovering she was pregnant and unmarried, which was a massive scandal at the time. She was allegedly filled with despair over her situation and the relentless death surrounding her, and decided to end her life in the place she worked. Her body was not discovered for some time, and the shock of the event reverberated through the staff and patients. Visitors to the room today often report feeling a sudden wave of overwhelming sadness or nausea upon entering the small space. Another tragedy occurred in room 502 in 1932, involving a different nurse who allegedly fell or jumped from the roof patio outside the room. The story goes that she plummeted several stories to her death, landing on the hard concrete below, where she died instantly. Whether this was an accident or a suicide, or something more sinister, remains a subject of debate among historians and ghost hunters. These two deaths have cemented the reputation of room 502 as a place of sorrow and negative energy. Many believe that the spirits of these women are trapped within the room and are unable to move on from the trauma of their final moments. Children were not spared from the ravages of the White Plague, and Waverly Hills had a dedicated children's wing and school to care for the young victims. These children were separated from their parents for months or years and forced to endure the same harsh treatments as the adults. Despite their suffering, they tried to find moments of joy and would play on the rooftop playground, which was enclosed to keep them safe. One of the most famous spirits said to haunt the sanatorium is a young boy named Timmy, who is often seen playing with a ball. Visitors bring toys and balls for Timmy, and some claim to see the balls move on their own, as if rolled by an invisible hand. The rooftop of the sanatorium offers a breathtaking view of the surrounding countryside, but it was also a place of exposure to the harsh elements for the patients. Heliotherapy, or sun treatment, was a popular therapy where children were placed on the roof to absorb ultraviolet light, which was thought to kill the bacteria. They would lie on cots for hours with their skin exposed to the sun, even on chilly days, in hopes of a cure. The laughter of children echoes in the memories of the building, but so does their crying as they longed for the comfort of their mothers and fathers. The energy on the roof is described as chaotic and active, with reports of small shadowy figures darting between the vents. As the years went by, the discovery of the antibiotic streptomycin in 1943 signaled the beginning of the end for the tuberculosis sanatoriums. The miracle drug provided a true cure for the disease, and the need for massive isolation facilities like Waverly Hills began to decline rapidly. The patient population dwindled, and the once crowded wards became silent and empty as people were discharged and returned to their lives. In 1961, Waverly Hills Sanatorium was closed as a tuberculosis hospital, marking the end of an era of suffering and death. However, the building would not remain empty for long, as it was repurposed for a new and perhaps even darker chapter. In 1962, the building was reopened as the Woodhaven Geriatric Center, which was a nursing home for the elderly and those with severe mental disabilities. Unfortunately, the facility was severely understaffed and overcrowded, leading to reports of neglect and abuse that rivaled the horrors of the tuberculosis years. Patients were allegedly mistreated and subjected to electric shock therapy and left in their own filth for days at a time. The compassionate care that characterized the sanatorium era was replaced by a cold and institutional indifference. The echoes of pain from the tuberculosis victims were now joined by the cries of the neglected elderly, compounding the negative energy. The conditions at Woodhaven eventually came to the attention of the state authorities, and the facility was closed down permanently in 1981 due to numerous violations. The massive building was abandoned and left to rot as nature began to reclaim the land and the structure. Vandals and trespassers broke in to explore the dark corridors and smash windows and spray paint graffiti on the walls. The property became a magnet for thrill seekers and those looking for a scare, and rumors of hauntings began to spread throughout the community. The once proud fortress of healing had become a hollow shell filled with debris and the memories of the dead. For decades, the building sat empty and deteriorating, with water leaking through the roof and destroying the floors and plaster walls. The bat wing shape that was designed to catch the breeze now caught the wind, which howled through the broken windows like a mournful choir. Local teenagers would dare each other to break in and run through the death tunnel or climb to the 5th floor at night. Many returned with terrifying stories of hearing footsteps following them, or seeing apparitions in the doorways, or feeling cold hands touch them in the dark. The legend of Waverly Hills grew with each passing year, turning it into an icon of horror. In 2001, the property was purchased by private owners who recognized the historical and paranormal significance of the site and began efforts to save it. They started restoration work to fix the windows and the roof, and opened the building for guided tour and paranormal investigations to fund the repairs. This opened the floodgates for researchers and television crews from around the world to document the activity inside. What they found confirmed the local legends, as audio recordings captured distinct voices and video cameras recorded unexplained shadows. The building seemed to be alive with the residual energy of the thousands who had died there. One of the most common experiences reported by visitors is the smell of cooking food, specifically the scent of fresh bread baking in the kitchen area. This is often attributed to the spirit of a man known as the baker, who worked in the kitchen and was known for his dedication to feeding the patients. It is a comforting scent in a place filled with decay and death, and suggests that some spirits remain out of a sense of duty. Other olfactory phenomena include the smell of flowers and heavy perfume, or the sharp antiseptic odor of a hospital ward. These sensory echoes provide a tangible link to the past that is difficult to dismiss. The fourth floor operating rooms are another hotbed of activity, where visitors often report feeling sudden sharp pains in their chest or back. Some believe this is a sympathetic reaction to the suffering of the patients who underwent thoracoplasty in those very rooms. Shadow figures are frequently seen peering around corners or standing guard in the hallway as if waiting for the next patient. The atmosphere on the fourth floor is described as intense and oppressive, with a sense of urgency that hangs in the air. Investigators have captured electronic voice phenomena here that sound like doctors giving orders or patients moaning in pain. The cafeteria and the auditorium were places where patients gathered for entertainment and meals, and they remain active with the sounds of a bygone era. Witnesses have reported hearing the murmur of conversation and the clinking of silverware and the sound of music playing from an empty stage. It is as if the energy of the social gatherings has been imprinted on the walls and replays itself over and over again. Occasionally, a full-bodied apparition is seen sitting at one of the tables or walking across the room before vanishing into thin air. These residual hauntings suggest that not all the memories here are tragic. However, there are also reports of darker and more malevolent entities that lurk in the shadows of the lower floors and the tunnel. Some visitors claim to have been scratched or pushed by unseen forces while exploring the darker recesses of the building. These aggressive encounters are rare, but terrifying, and serve as a reminder that the suffering here was not always passive. The concept of the creeper is a shadow figure, often seen crawling along the floors or walls in an unnatural manner. This entity is distinct from the human spirits and brings a sense of primal fear to those who encounter it. The sheer size of the building means that there are countless rooms and corridors that have yet to be fully explored or documented by paranormal teams. Each room has a story and a potential spirit attached to it, waiting to be heard by the living. The peeling paint and rusting metal fixtures create a texture of decay that enhances the spooky atmosphere and plays tricks on the mind. Pareidolia, which is the tendency to see faces in random patterns, is common here, but many images captured on camera defy logical explanation. The line between imagination and reality blurs quickly in the dimly lit hallways of Waverly Hills. One particularly chilling phenomenon is the doppelganger effect, where visitors report seeing their own double, or the double of a friend walking in the distance. This disorienting experience creates a sense of unreality and confusion that can cause panic in even the most seasoned investigators. It is said that the building acts as a mirror, reflecting the fears and anxieties of those who enter it back at them. The psychological impact of the environment is just as potent as the supernatural activity. The isolation and the history of the place weigh heavily on the psyche. The legacy of the nurses who lived and died at Waverly Hills is honored by many visitors who leave flowers and small gifts at the nursing stations. These women were the frontline soldiers in the war against tuberculosis, and their sacrifice is not forgotten by history or the spirits. Some claim to see nurses in old-fashioned white uniforms, walking the halls, making their rounds, and checking on invisible patients. They are described as appearing solid and lifelike until they walk through a closed door or a solid wall. Their dedication seems to transcend death itself, keeping them tethered to the wards. The paranormal community considers Waverly Hills to be the holy grail of haunted locations due to the consistency and volume of the activity reported there. It has been featured on virtually every ghost hunting television show and documentary, cementing its status in pop culture. However, beneath the hype and the sensationalism lies a deep and profound tragedy that demands respect. The thousands of souls who passed through these doors were real people with families and dreams that were cut short. The ghosts are not just scary stories, but echoes of a painful past that we are only beginning to understand. Skeptics argue that the experiences at Waverly Hills are the result of suggestion and the natural creaking of an old settling building combined with the wind. They point to the power of the legend to prime the mind to see and hear things that are not really there. Yet even the most hardened skeptics often leave the sanatorium with a newfound uncertainty after spending a night in the darkness. There are simply too many consistent reports from unconnected witnesses to dismiss the phenomena entirely as mass hysteria. The building has a presence that is undeniable and palpable. The owners of the property continue to work on restoring the building and preserving its history for future generations to learn from. They have plans to turn part of the facility into a hotel and conference center while keeping the haunted areas open for tour. This controversial plan has sparked debate about the ethics of commercializing a place of such immense suffering and death. Some believe that the renovations might stir up the activity even more, while others think it might bring peace to the spirits. Regardless of the future, the past of Waverly Hills is etched in stone. As you walk away from the imposing structure, and look back at the red brick walls, it is hard not to feel a sense of relief to be leaving. The air outside the gates feels lighter, and the world seems brighter in comparison to the gloom of the sanatorium. But for many, the experience of visiting Waverly Hills lingers long after they have driven down the hill and returned to safety. They find themselves dreaming of the long corridors and the shadow figures and the sound of the coughing. The sanatorium has a way of getting under your skin and staying there. Waverly Hills Sanatorium stands as a monument to a time when humanity was helpless against a microscopic killer, and fear ruled the day. It is a reminder of the fragility of life and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. The echoes of the past are strong here, and they serve as a warning and a lesson for the living. The ghosts of the White Plague may never truly leave this hill, and perhaps they shouldn't. They are the guardians of a history that should never be forgotten. In the quiet moments just before dawn, when the fog rolls in off the Ohio River, the sanatorium looks almost peaceful in its slumber. But those who know its history know that there is no true peace to be found within those walls. The energy of 60,000 deaths is not easily dissipated, and it swirls through the empty rooms like a restless wind. Waverly Hills is not just a building, but a vessel for the sorrow of a generation lost to disease. And as long as the bricks stand, the echoes will continue. The story of Waverly Hills is far from over as new generations discover the legend and seek to uncover the truth behind the hauntings. It remains a beacon for those fascinated by the macabre and the mysteries of the afterlife and the unknown. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the history of the place is enough to send a shiver down your spine. It is a place where the veil between the living and the dead feels terrifyingly thin, and if you listen closely, you might just hear the sound of the Body Chute door sliding open. Ultimately, the true horror of Waverly Hills is not the ghosts or the shadows, but the reality of what happened there in the name of medicine. It was a place of exile where the sick were sent to die away from the eyes of society. The spirits that remain are a testament to the trauma of isolation and the fear of the unknown that defined their existence. They are the lasting echoes of tuberculosis, a disease that shaped the modern world in ways we often forget, and they are still waiting for a cure that came too late. The sun sets behind the massive structure, casting long shadows that stretch down the hill towards the city of Louisville below. The lights of the modern world twinkle in the distance, a stark contrast to the darkness that envelops the sanatorium. Inside the building, the temperature drops, and the nocturnal residents begin to stir in the silence. The day shift is over, and the night shift has begun for the spirits of Waverly Hills. They resume their eternal rounds in a hospital that will never close. The heavy iron gates at the bottom of the hill swing shut locking the secrets of the sanatorium away from the world for another night. But the stories escape, carried on the wind, and in the nightmares of those who have dared to enter, Waverly Hills remains a scar on the landscape, a physical manifestation of pain and loss. It is a place where the past is always present, and the dead are never truly gone. And in the darkness, the coughing continues. As the final darkness settles over the hill, one can almost imagine the faces pressing against the glass of the solarium windows, looking out. They are the faces of the forgotten, the lost, and the damned who call this place home. They watch the living come and go with a mixture of envy and sorrow, and perhaps a touch of anger. They are the permanent residents of Waverly Hills, and they are waiting for you. The echo of their suffering is the heartbeat of the building. So if you ever find yourself driving through southwestern Louisville and see the outline of a massive building on a hill look away, do not let your curiosity draw you up that winding path into the fog, where the air is cold and stale. For if you enter the domain of the White Plague, you may find that you bring a piece of it back with you. The lasting echoes of tuberculosis are not just sounds, but a contagion of the soul. And once infected, there is no cure. The final thought that lingers is that Waverly Hills is not just a haunted house, but a mass grave that has been disturbed. The sheer density of death in such a confined space has created a singularity of spiritual energy. It is a black hole of grief that pulls in everything around it and refuses to let go. The sanatorium is a reminder that some places are best left to the dead, and that some doors once opened can never be closed again.